welcome, not just by the people of Chios, but of course the Euphoria as well. And they've always been so generous in their embracing of the work of the British School here on Chios. And I fell in love with the island then, and I'm thrilled to be back here some 30 years later. And as we've heard from the speakers already, theirs is a story of love, and what I'm going to talk about tonight is really the love that the BSA, the British School at Athens, has for the island of Chios. I don't need to tell you that Chios is an island at the crossroads of the Eastern Aegean and also Western Anatolia. It is a big island, but not just that, it's rich in natural resources, and as so, it has made it a significant cultural, demographic and political presence throughout its long human history. The British School of Athens, BSA as I'll call it from now, has maintained a very long and deep interest in this enigmatic island, having undertaken surveys, excavations, underwater archaeology here on the island for nearly 120 years, almost as old as the BSA in fact. And the work that it's undertaken range from on sites from Bronze Age right up to medieval too. In fact, one of the earliest issues of the BSA's annual publications, the annual of the BSA, features Frederick Hasluck's survey of the island, of the so-called Latin monuments of the island, undertaken in around 1910, published in 1912. And I show you one of the slides here, and then the next one. And these photographs we have in the archives of the British School, huge number of amazing photographs from before the Second World War. And if you're interested in having a look at them, having a look at Hasluck's photographs, you just need to go to digital collections on the BSA, and just put in a search for Chios, and it'll bring up photographs and maps and aerial photographs. We've, for example, got material from John Pendlebury, a famous Cretan archaeologist who took a trip here in the 1930s and took lots of photographs, and then, of course, the Hasluck images that we have from the 1910-1911. In 1913, in 1913, shortly after the island's liberation from Ottoman rule, Konstantinos Kourignotis carried out pioneering work at the Temple of Apollo at Katofana. Later, Winifred Lamb, who you see here on the slide, she herself is an archaeological pioneer. She also undertook work at the temple, which I'll tell you a little bit about in a few minutes, and undertook a publication of the island's archaic past. This was in the 1930s. Now, in fact, she spent most of her career working on Mytilene next door. Around the same time, the very fabulous Edith Eccles undertook a very broad survey of the island, and in doing so, she settled on excavation of two prehistoric caves that, in fact, we were already talking about earlier on, two prehistoric caves in the northwest of the island at Ayorala. And she published her results too, very quickly, and then shortly this was followed by David Hunt's publication on the classical antiquities of the island in the 1940s as well. Following the Second World War, there was a new phase of work undertaken on the island, and this involved the very well-known archaeologists Sinclair Hood and John Boardman. John Boardman and Hood, assisted by archaeologists Anderson and Nichols, began work on the Kofina Ridge on the northern edge of ancient Chios, so actually in Chios town now, and they published their results of the excavations of an early Bronze Age site in the 1950s. And then Hood stayed on the island a lot, well, not forever, but he carried on work on the island, uncovering prehistoric remains, including a Bronze Age cemetery and a Roman tomb at Dotia, which is just across the way. His work at Amborio, which was undertaken between 1953 and 55, illuminated the site's long occupation from the Bronze Age to the Roman to the late Antique period. And John, in the late 1990s, a new program of excavations began under the co-direction of Dr. Leslie Beaumont, the then assistant director of the BSA, and Dr. Omilia Rebecca, who was the FR of the effort here. Their work, which took place between 1999 and 2005, focused on the southwest corner of the sanctuary, a plot which had already been identified through Winifred Lamb's work. Their goal was to define and document the site's diachronic use, the Bronze Age to the late Antique periods, and in this they succeeded. Epomene. During their work, finds from the late geometric, archaic, Roman, and late Antique periods remained abundant. But they also found, somewhat to their surprise, middle and early geometric, proto-geometric, and even late Mycenaean material. Furthermore, the nature of the late Mycenaean material, which include bovine figurines, marble sword pommels, and the remains of at least one ritual vessel, suggested that religious worship at the site actually had already been in place in the late Bronze Age period. So we seem to have good continuation of cult here. Epomene. By the Middle Geometric period, the site's finds indicate an intensification of the use of the area, which culminated in an explosion of a vast range of different kinds of votives. And so by the 8th century, it seems that this sanctuary became an extra-urban sanctuary, which served not just the local inhabitants of southwest Chios, but also probably much greater regional communities as well. And it may well have been a stop for maritime trade, north and east, as shown by the imported finds like faience, ivory, and amber. Epomene. The excavations were also able to clarify the architectural history of the sanctuary. Until the 7th century, there was very little evidence for any built structures on the site, just the finds. However, beginning in the 7th century, the boundaries of the sanctuary were first built, and access to it came from the seaward side up a set of stairs. The first of the peribolous walls, there were two at least, the first of the peribolous walls seems to have been built in terrace fashion around and against the natural lie of the land, around the small kind of hill on which the sanctuary stood. The stepped staircase consisted of 8 steps, led up to it. It was a stone staircase, and it was built on the west side, providing entrance to the sanctuary. Subsequently, in the 6th century, a second